If you've ever looked beyond stocks and ETFs, you've probably run into private investments, real estate deals, private equity funds, hedge funds, and other syndications. They all promise strong returns, but they play by very different rules. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to think about these types of investments, what questions to ask, what red flags to look for, and how to compare them fairly, because not all private investments are created equal. For those of you new here, my name is Mark Anderson, construction worker turned 0DT hedge fund manager. I've sold over $50 million in 0DT premium across over 1,000 consecutive market trading days. This video isn't here to pitch you on hedge funds or any one path. Really, it's just about giving you the clarity and the tools to evaluate private investing landscape for yourself. You can make decisions that align with your goals, your risk tolerance, and your values. Understanding the private investment landscape. Let's start by zooming out. Most private investments fall into one of three large categories: real estate syndications, private equity, and hedge funds. Each one plays a different game. They compete on different things. Some chase returns, some focus on tax advantages, some play it safer. Others go for moonshots. That's why understanding the trade-offs really matters. Real estate syndications, the tax-efficient crowd pleaser. Let's talk about real estate syndications. If you've never heard of that before, it's when a group of investors pull their money together to buy a larger property, usually an apartment complex, office building, or industrial space. There's a sponsor or a general partner who manages the deal. Everyone else is a limited partner, meaning you provide the capital but don't have any control. These are marketed as tax-efficient, cash flow generating, tangible investments. And they've exploded in popularity, especially with high-income professionals looking for diversification. On the surface, the pitch is appealing. You get depreciation and tax benefits. You earn a preferred return, say 8 to 10% per year, before the sponsor takes a cut, and you don't have to do any of the work. Sounds great, right? But here's where red flags start to show. First, upside sharing is often misunderstood. Yes, you may get the first 8 to 10% return per year, but after that, the sponsor usually keeps 100% of the profits after 20% or even earlier sometimes. That creates a weird incentive structure where they're motivated to chase big risk, even if the capital is still exposed. Second, liquidity is almost always terrible. Your money might be locked up for 5 years plus, even 10 years, with no clear way to exit. And you're often breaking even until there's a sale. So unless you know the interest rate or the cap rates will look like years from now, your entire return hinges on a narrow exit plan. And third, lack of diversification. Most syndications are tied to a single asset in a single location. That means your entire investment might be riding on one apartment complex in Phoenix, in one neighborhood that if it tanks, the building runs into issues, you lose your buffer. And here's something people don't realize. A lot of syndications are just rolling capital forward from one deal to the next. That means your money might be used to bail out a previous investment or project that hasn't exited yet. It's not illegal, but it's definitely not ideal. Plus, unlike hedge funds or institutional real estate funds, syndications are lightly regulated. The barrier to entry is low, and almost anyone can put one together. That makes it hard to know who is really doing strong deals with, or their track record actually means something meaningful. So if you're considering a syndication, ask this: how is the sponsor compensated? How many past deals have they exited, and what was their return? Where else is their capital currently tied up? What assumptions are they making about future interest rates or exit multiples? Is there any ability to liquidate, or is your money 100% locked? Real estate has looked great since 2008, but that was during a multi-decade run of declining interest rates and subsidy from the Fed. We may not know if that environment is here anymore, and unless you're fully aware of the risk and trade-offs, you're not investing, you're just hoping. Private equity. High stakes, less transparency. Now let's talk about private equity. This category gets hyped for delivering institutional returns. But when you really peel back the layers, it gets murky fast. At a high level, private equity firms raise money from investors to buy businesses. Think of a manufacturing company, tech firms, or dental chains, and try to improve their operations, grow revenue, and then sell it for a profit. Sounds straightforward, right? But here's where it gets complicated. These deals are often highly leveraged, meaning a large chunk of the acquisition is funded with debt. The returns often rely on forward-looking assumptions that don't always materialize. And since everything is private, there's no real-time pricing. You're just trusting that the fund's evaluation marks are accurate over time. Even when the world says otherwise, they can be different. Let me give you an example. During COVID, private equity firms that owned professional sports teams didn't mark down that valuation in 2020, despite stadiums being empty, revenues collapsing, and uncertainty everywhere. Why? Because they didn't have to. They were not forced to mark down the investment. No public pricing, just accounting saying, yep, still looks fine to me. That's a feature of private equity. It moves at a different tempo than public markets, but it can also hide the pain for a long time until it hits. And here's the other thing. You'll often hear private equity touting internal rates of returns of 15%, and that's great, but they rarely explain the math. Many funds have capital call structures. That means you commit the money today, they call it in 3 to 6 months. Then it sits idle for another few months before it's getting deployed. So while they report a clean 15% internal rate of return, your capital might have been doing nothing for nearly a year. And during that downtime is not reflected in your return. There's also a lot of creative accounting at play. Most firms push the cost of their in-house team onto the companies they buy, so you're paying for their staff indirectly. They also pass along transaction fees and debt interest on the balance sheet through those companies. And they still charge you a traditional 2 and 20 on top of all of those other fees. So even if your portfolio grows, a chunk of that gain is just clever packaging of fees. And while we're all talking about incentives, here's something to really consider. If private equity used to be an elite closed-door game for the ultra-wealthy, why isn't it suddenly being marketed to the masses? That's not a coincidence. A lot of this industry is now about selling trillions of illiquid assets with murky values to as many investors as possible. To be fair, this is the one big benefit of private equity offers over others, is diversification from volatility. When public markets drop 20%, you see it instantly. But with private equity, there's a lag. Their portfolio doesn't mark down immediately, and they can smooth out their returns and keep people calmer over drawdowns for up to 2 years. But make no mistake, the risk is still there. It just doesn't show up on the surface until much later. So if you're evaluating private equity deals, ask this. Is the fund audited? What's the real IRR once you include capital and idle time? What's the debt load across a portfolio? How do they value their investments and how often? Who's actually paying for their team and the deals of the fees as well as interest cost of the debt they take out? And what happens to evaluations in a downturn? If they can't answer these clearly or gloss over them quick, run. Hedge fund. Public markets, private strategies. Last up, hedge funds. Compared to private equity or real estate syndications, hedge funds operate in public markets. That means pricing is transparent, trades are marked to market, and in many cases, illiquidity is more reasonable, monthly or quarterly. Redemptions are often very common, but in the world of hedge funds, covers a wide spectrum. There's long-short equity, where managers buy stocks and they short ones at the same exact time that they don't like. There are also macro funds that trade currencies, commodities, and interest rates. And there are quant funds like Renaissance Technologies, which uses math models to trade massive volumes and have produced mind-blowing returns over decades. These investments are different. So when valuating a hedge fund, you have to go deeper than you think just on the performance numbers. Ask these questions. Is it audited? What's the core strategy and what markets does it do well in and poorly in? Are these returns coming from real alpha or just leverage of a common trade? Can I talk to the person managing the actual money in trading? And here's something most people overlook. Because hedge funds trade in public markets, they generate real, realized P&L. The profit is not hypothetical. It's not a projected exit. It's cash each day. That allows for much clearer risk-adjusted metrics. You can actually compare performance to volatility, calculate Sharpe ratios, and see if the manager's return is coming from skill or just from taking on more risk in the market. Also, hedge funds tend to be low-cost operators in the public markets. They pay less for order execution, routing, data, and are much cheaper to execute than retail traders can execute the same strategy. That alone is a real structural edge. Now, not all hedge funds are created equal. Some charge steep fees without delivering excess returns, often impose unnecessary lockups on strategies that don't require them, like daily futures trading with a 12-month lockup. That's a red flag. So if you're evaluating a hedge fund, make sure the liquidity matches the strategy. Make sure the risk-adjusted return is worth the fees. And make sure you understand where the edge is actually coming from. Hedge funds aren't magical, but their good ones are clear, accountable, and built on math, not marketing decks. The universal checklist, 6 questions to ask every time. No matter what kind of private investment you're evaluating, here's a quick gut check framework you can use. How is the manager compensated? Is the investment audited and verified by a third party with a fund administrator? How often can I see the performance, and how is it marked to market? How liquid is the investment? What is the real risk being taken here? What benchmark or future cash flows can I compare this to? These 6 questions can help you avoid some major pitfalls and make sure you know what you're really signing up for. Here's the thing. Private investing isn't about chasing the highest number on pitch decks. It's about understanding the rules of the game, how the incentives work, and what your role is in that game. Sometimes the best move is walking away. Sometimes it's leaning in. But either way, asking the right questions puts you in a much stronger position. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe. And if you're currently exploring private investments, check out my other videos on how to build a risk-adjusted and aware portfolio, and for a deeper dive into balancing returns and protections. Now I want to hear from you. What's the most confusing part about private investments for you? Or if you've already made a private investment, what's one thing you wish you knew beforehand? Drop it in the comments below. I read every one. Thanks for watching.